Composting is the most successful story in recycling and resource recovery in the United States, hands down. So thank you to all of you. You're participating in that. And if we take a step back and look at the whole picture, right, it's not just about resource recovery and management and can we actually close the loop. It's about making sure we have a place for all of us, our children, our children's children, but also don't forget you right now, a place to live that's healthy, that supports our lifestyle, etc. So come along with me on a quick journey to an imagined 2050 where all single-use products are fully compostable or recyclable. Every state in the United States has curbside pickup for organics. We've got robust and profitable compost markets. And then we're also using that compost and applying it to millions of acres of agricultural land. And what that means with the application of compost on agricultural land is that we're able to sequester 30 million tons of CO2e, that's the equivalent of CO2, per year. Now, what does that mean? That's the same as taking over 70 gas-powered power plants offline. That's a big, significant number. So these things make a real difference. Sounds like a dream, right? So maybe, but we're also starting to see some of the beginnings of this. We've got laws in California, we've got laws in Washington, Massachusetts, Vermont, and a lot of them are really focused on organic diversion, which is great. But diverting away from landfill, and then what? There has to be support for this end market. But why? So why are we doing this? Why agriculture? I'm going to pause for a second and let you read this. So don't just take my word for it. This information is coming out of Harvard, UC Berkeley, and the Rodale Institute. These are papers, they're linked down there. I'll make them available later. But the point is that we can use our land, use our recycled organics, and really come up with a significant solution. How does it work? I like to think about it as the plants as pumps. This is leveraging natural existing processes, right? It's not just the moving of organic material from one place to another. We're not doing this in trucks, right? We're using compost to essentially jumpstart plant life, and those plants are doing their natural process, photosynthesis, taking carbon dioxide out of the air, pushing it into the soil, and over time that just goes deeper and deeper, and we want it down there, right? And then a higher carbon stocks in our soil has a whole slew of benefits that are true for each and every one of us, right? From water holding capacity, soil health, biodiversity, even nutrient density, right? So the food grown in healthier soil is more nutritious for each of us. Why does that carrot from the farmer's market taste better than the carrot from the big box store? It literally has more nutrients in it because it's grown in healthier soil. So this all makes sense, right? It must be just done. The free market will take care of this. There must be a way that this is happening already, right? Let's assume you're on board with this. But guess what? There's not really a mechanism to connect all these dots. So here's Zero Foodprint, and our understanding, our belief is that it takes all of us working together to connect the dots, and we believe in collective action. So essentially what that means is a penny from different place, working from private businesses, philanthropists, governments, grants, etc., all work together to essentially help and work with farms so that they can fund some of these transitions, because the idea that they're taking it on by themselves and that it's individual businesses' responsibility, while we might like that as consumers, I think it's all of our responsibilities. So for perspective, in the last 5 years, Zero Foodprint has committed over $12 million to farms in 10 states to adopt practices such as compost use. One of our programs, our original program, is called Restore, and that is focused on raising money from restaurants and private businesses, and I'll give a shout out to both Better Earth and Eco Products, because they have funded farm projects through Zero Foodprint before. So it is, again, all of us. And what we realized in the first year of making these grants with private money is that over 75% of the farms were asking for funds to apply compost on their lands. And what we've seen over and over again is that we don't, as a small nonprofit, have the resources to give compost and get it to everybody. We are regularly oversubscribed by 8x, right? Every time we have a grant round, we might be able to fund 10 or 15 projects, but there might be 100 requests. And so we are always looking for ways in which we can find more resources. So in California, we saw, this SB 1383 might just have something that we could do. I know it's making a headache for a lot of people, but in reality, for us on the ground, it's helping hundreds of farms. So this is some of the information. There's concern, right? Will it make it to farmland? Can we get and permit the new facilities? All this. So I look here, and I say, okay, 90 facilities, I can understand what that is. 5 million tons per year, well, I don't know if I can understand that. But the procurement requirements are where Zero Foodprint works. And that is, there's an Article 12 of SB 1383 says that every jurisdiction must procure or use compost. So if every jurisdiction complies, that's about 1.7 million tons per year. Again, what does that even mean? We talked before, how big is that? So I like to think of it in a bigger unit, which would be semi-trailers. That's about 85,000 semi-trailers. Okay, so here's 400. That's about 8,000 tons. Here's 6,000 semi-trailers. Don't worry, there's only 13 more of these slides. But in all seriousness, when you talk about that, how are we going to use all that material and put it to its best use? How much landscaping do we need? How many mines do we fill with it, etc.? Where's the best use? Where are we going to put it all? In California alone, there's 24 million acres of managed farmland, and that's not including rangeland. These are crops, right? And so this is coming out of a study from CalRecycle, which is the regulatory agency in California. Agriculture makes a lot of sense, right? But what about the rest of the country? Not everywhere is California. So let's think about the whole country. There are over 245 million acres of planted farmland in the United States. Remember that 2050 vision where we were talking about 20 million tons of finished compost? That's about 165 slides of the 6,000 trailers. If we had 20 million tons of compost to use, we could put that on just 7.5% of the land we use to grow corn alone, right? That's just corn, a single crop, not even 10% of the land, and we would put those 20 million tons to significant use, right, and take those 70-plus power plant equivalents offline. So the numbers are there. Obviously, we have some logistical challenges to deal with. So there's no market support in most of these laws. They're all focused on the diversion and what happens to the actual composting process. But we have to also think about the markets and the use of the material. So I've managed almost 1,000 compost projects in a number of states. And we all think about the cost of material. How much is it per yard? How much is it per ton? But we don't think about delivery. We don't think about spreading. And in general, the cost of the material is the cheapest part of the whole process. So I see in California and western states, we're looking at about $50 to $100 per ton of compost. That can be sometimes over $2,000 per acre of land. And I always say, oh, the farms will pay for it, right? They're getting subsidies, they're looking for new ways to do, manage their crops and their inputs. But I want to provide a little perspective. In 2023, only 23% of income from farming families came from the farm. That means they're working second jobs at the, convenience store. These are not, the idea that farms alone are going to be able to purchase and use this material is not realistic. And not only do they benefit, but we all benefit when this material is used on agriculture. As I mentioned before, it's not just the carbon sequestration, it's not just the increased yield, it's not just the biodiversity, water holding capacity. You get the idea. So in California, we have one of the most robust and mature compost markets in the United States. I've heard that some people say that California composts more material than the rest of the 49 other states combined. So I don't know if that's true, but I think we can all understand that the volume is quite great. And you would think that California then has it figured out. We don't, obviously. Next year, I hope to come back and tell you how we did figure it out. But what we've heard in general is that compostables can contribute to a quality material. So we have already part of the system that goes through, but it's not, the process on the purchasing side is not quite as straightforward. We have logistical issues such as, where do you buy compost? What type of compost do you need? It's not always that easy to read a technical data sheet. It's not always easy to find a vendor who has the material you need when you need it. And so ideally, we're working to find ways to provide logistical support for farms. Let's talk about the competition for a second. Chemical fertilizer. Guess what they do? They call up the farmer and say, hey, we just tested your soil. It looks great like last year. We're going to bring the product on Friday. Is Friday good for you? We're going to spray it for you, and we're going to finance it for you, right? We are not doing that in the compost industry, so we have really big competition. And if the idea of a one-stop shop were available, can you imagine how much more use we would get, and a higher value product will trickle up, down? I'm not sure which direction, but it's really positive for the industry and for the environment. And so the idea is not just for those logistics, but also access to additional services. You see this bucket. It's really cute. This is a very common way that farms apply compost. Buckets, shovels, wheelbarrows, etc. So let's, again, get real for a second. That's a 5-gallon bucket. You might need to do 800 trips with that bucket on 1 acre. How are you going to do that when your competition is saying, we'll come and we'll spray it for you and we'll finance it for you? So obviously there are gaps in the marketplace. And as you see, there are studies already that talk about some of these issues. Access, right? Where do you get it? How do you get it? How do you know if it's the right thing? We see the benefits, and then the same study is coming out with some of these concerns: food safety, availability, cost, and logistics. And so I welcome everyone to think about some of these larger issues that come really when we're thinking about those end markets. And so Zero Foodprint is starting to think about that. We have a site called Compost.ag. I love the maps and everything. This is something that we work on quite a bit on the sort of sales side or vendor side. And so this is a website. It is live right now for California, really just providing access to where you can find a facility that sells compost. And in early 2026, this is going to be going live with a new version where it's going to be providing support around some of those logistics, connecting purchasers, farmers to vendors, and their ability to request information about material, quotes, etc. And eventually moving into things like delivery and spreading. Again, we call it the hotels.com of compost because it's, you show up and you need a hotel, maybe you need the material, but when you're there, do you need a rental car? Do you need a flight? There's all these ancillary services that could be available, and right now it's the responsibility of each individual farm to find them. And that's not the only thing we're working on. I'll appreciate the shout out earlier on the grant that the U.S. Composting Council received. We are working on that with them because the guidance in agriculture is also lacking, and it's relatively new. It was just in 2022 when the USDA adopted a conservation practice standard for compost use in agriculture. Let's be real, compost has been used in agriculture for thousands of years. Why did it take 3,000 years for the USDA to adopt this practice? And even then, the practice standard comes with minimal guidance. It literally says, work with a technical expert to see what type of compost and when and how to apply it, which is insufficient. So the grant with the U.S. Composting Council will be looking at over 85 trials in 3 states. And the idea is to create that guidance in a prescriptive way, but that's still flexible, that farms and ranches can really understand. What happens when you apply 3 tons per acre, 5 tons per acre, 10 tons per acre? How often should I apply it, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you to the USCC and USDA for that. And then I want to thank you all as well, and I want to kind of challenge everyone as well, because we are here talking about a particular element of this process, right? Can my materials, my products break down and be a source for good in the world, in the composting? And I applaud everyone for your participation in that. I remember that this is something we have to do together, right? It's not just about a single SKU or 1,000 SKUs. It's not just about how long it takes to break down. It's about what happens to it afterwards. What are you contributing to? And how can that end use contribute to what we're all doing? So first, thank you. And also remember that this is part of a bigger system, and there's work for all of us to do, and many people are doing their part, and you are as well, and thank you very much.